Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I left the military, I thought my battles were behind me until I found myself at war with a suburban HOA queen, defending my peaceful lakeside land from entitled neighbors, drone spies, and a pastel-clad tyrant named Karen. This wasn't combat. It was something far messier. When I left the military, I didn't expect my next battle would be fought behind a cedar fence, with spreadsheets instead of rifles, and a smug suburban tyrant instead of armed opposition. But that's exactly how it started. I bought the property, 40 acres of gently rolling land outside a small town in Georgia, about 2 years after my last deployment. A creek snaked through the lower pasture, feeding a modest lake that shimmered just east of my back porch. I had a small dock, a deep water spot perfect for swimming, and a pool I'd built myself. Simple, clean, surrounded by flagstone and quiet. The place was peaceful, private, and most importantly, mine. There was no HOA here. That was part of the appeal. I had made damn sure of it before I signed a single piece of paper. No approved shrub heights, no threats for not flying the flag at exactly 45 degrees, no pastel color palettes dictated by some over-entitled suburban board, just open space, trees, and the right to be left alone. The fence came about 6 months after I moved in. At first, I didn't think I needed one. The nearest houses were about half a mile away in a recently built subdivision called Hickory Ridge Lakeside Estates, which sounded fancy enough to come with mandatory polo shirts and personality disorders. But one weekend in July, I spotted 2 kids, maybe 8 or 9, cutting across my pasture with towels over their shoulders and inflatable donuts dragging behind them. They waved, ran down the slope, and cannonballed straight into my lake like it was the neighborhood pool. It would have been almost funny if it hadn't been followed by more kids, teens, and eventually even some parents. They acted like the lake was public property. Some even brought coolers. I once saw a guy hauling in a damn Bluetooth speaker and setting up near my dock like it was a beach party. One woman actually had the audacity to ask where the restrooms were. So yeah, I built a fence. A proper one. 8 feet tall, pressure-treated cedar planks reinforced with steel posts every 6 feet. It wrapped the entire south and east borders of my property with a black wrought iron gate at the front, heavy as hell, key-coded, and motorized. I posted private property and no trespassing signs at every logical entry point. Not to be rude, but to make it crystal clear, this isn't a park and you're not welcome unless I say so. It took about 3 weeks to install, and I'll admit, I enjoyed watching the puzzled expressions of random passers-by when they saw their little shortcut to paradise was now a dead end. Then came the knock. It was a Thursday morning. I was scraping old paint off my workshop siding when I heard the beep-beep of a luxury SUV backing up. A white Lexus, the kind that smells like overpriced coffee and passive aggression. Out steps a woman, early 50s, blonde bob, visor, clipboard. "Hi there," she called out like we were old friends. "I'm Karen from Hickory Ridge Estates. I'm the president of the HOA. She smiled like she'd just blessed me with her divine presence. Thought I'd come introduce myself. I wiped my hands on a rag. "Hi, I'm Mike. I don't think I'm in your association." "Oh, of course," she laughed, already climbing halfway up my drive. "Technically no, but you're right next to us, and your property's very visible from our community's eastern trailhead. That fence," she gestured vaguely, "kind of disrupts the natural flow of the area, don't you think?" I blinked. "It's my land. It keeps people out." "Well, sure." She nodded, still smiling like a raptor in lipstick. "But several families have been using the lake recreationally for years. The previous owners never had a problem with that. Some of our children learned to swim there." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not the previous owner, and that lake's on my deed. So is the pool. None of it is public. I'm not part of any HOA, and I'm not granting access." The smile didn't falter, but her eyes changed, sharpened. "I'm sure we can find a compromise. The community considers the lake a shared resource." "That's going to be a problem," I said evenly, "because I consider the community's entitlement not my damn problem." There was a long pause. Then she smoothed her clipboard like it had personally offended her. "Well," she said crisply, "we'll be in touch." She turned and walked back to her SUV. I watched her drive off, but not before she stopped at the bottom of the drive, angled her phone, and took several photos of my fence, gate, and mailbox. I stood there for a moment, rag still in my hand, a faint buzz rising in the back of my mind. I didn't know what was coming yet, but I could feel it, like the low hum in your boots before the shell hits. Something told me Karen wasn't going to let this go. 3 days after Karen's little visit, I got mail. Not the usual kind. Not bills or local election flyers or ammo catalogs I didn't remember subscribing to. No. This envelope was thick, certified, and carried the smug authority of something bureaucratic. Hickory Ridge Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association, the header declared, complete with their leafy little logo and fake fountain. Inside was a formal notice of violation. According to their letter, my newly built fence was obstructing historic community access to shared recreational space, and thus was in violation of community aesthetic standards. It also warned that unless I removed the barrier and restored open lakefront access, I would face fines of $100 per day, starting in 10 business days. I read the letter 3 times. Then I laughed out loud. My land wasn't part of their HOA. It had never been part of their HOA. I had a deed, a property survey, and county zoning maps to prove it. But what struck me wasn't the stupidity of the threat. It was the tone. The smug assumption that their rules somehow extended beyond their borders, that their jurisdiction had no boundaries, that I would fold under the weight of an official-looking letter. I didn't respond. Instead, I scanned everything, forwarded it to my attorney, George Reyes, sharp as a damn nail and about as patient as a hornet, and went back to my life. But the tone had shifted. I started noticing things. The same white Lexus drove by my gate twice a day. Strangers slowed down in their SUVs, staring through the bars. One evening, I found a bunch of popsicle sticks and candy wrappers down by the lake. Then footprints. Small ones. Kids had snuck in again, only now they were going around the fence. So I installed motion-activated lights along the back trail and added a few more security cameras. Nothing lethal, nothing aggressive, just a firm reminder that Big Brother was watching, and Big Brother owned a Remington. The next escalation came the following Saturday. I was working in the shed when I heard a loud crack. I stepped outside and found a chunk of my eastern fence smashed in. Someone had rammed it. Not a car, but maybe a heavy ATV. I found tire tracks leading back toward the trail that ran behind Hickory Ridge. I called the sheriff's department and filed a report. The deputy, a lanky kid named Dalton, seemed sympathetic, but shrugged. Hard to prove intent, he said, even as he photographed the cracked post. No cameras caught it? Not this time, I admitted. I'll fix that. Dalton gave me a look. Just, be careful, sir. Some of these HOA types get real intense. Oh, I was starting to get that. By Monday, another letter arrived. This one was more aggressive. It accused me of hostile behavior, community disruption, and, I kid you not, monopolization of natural resources. They attached a blurry satellite image of my lake with a hand-drawn red circle around it, labeled Public Use Zone, previously accessible. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so stupidly aggressive. Then came the HOA meeting. A neighbor, a retiree named Howard, who lived down the road and used to buy eggs from me, tipped me off. He said Karen had called a special community forum about the fence issue, and my name was on the agenda. I wasn't invited, of course. Not officially. But Howard sent me photos from the meeting room. A projector screen showing a zoomed-in aerial of my property, with bullet points like blocking access to shared lake and uncooperative behavior. They were painting me as the enemy. A hostile outsider, a land-hoarding recluse who hated children and nature and joy itself. Karen was up front, standing like she was leading a revival. We can't allow one man to control a resource this community has shared for over a decade, she said, according to Howard. Never mind that this community didn't exist until 5 years ago, or that no one had permission to use any of it, ever. The same night, someone threw a beer bottle over my gate. It didn't break anything, just rattled against the bars and landed near the driveway. I reviewed the security footage, couldn't catch the plate, but it was a dark blue pickup, probably local. I sent the clip to George. He replied, "They're probing. Don't respond directly. We'll bleed them with paperwork if they keep pushing." So I dug in. I installed 2 more trail cameras, swapped my locks, reinforced the gate, and bought a second floodlight. I didn't want violence. I wanted boundaries. Legal, visible, unambiguous boundaries. But Karen wasn't looking for compromise. She was just getting warmed up. It was still dark out when the banging started. 3 loud, deliberate knocks on my front door at 5:15 in the morning. I was already awake. Old habits from my military days die hard, but I still grabbed the shotgun leaning against the kitchen wall as I approached. Not to use it, just to carry it. It was my house, my land, and I wasn't in the mood for surprises. Through the peephole, 2 sheriff's deputies and a third guy with a clipboard. I cracked the door open. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Mike Barrett," one deputy asked, squinting slightly. "That's me." He shifted awkwardly. "We received a call about a disturbance on this property, possible unlawful detainment, and aggressive behavior." I blinked. "From who?" Before he could answer, clipboard guy stepped forward. "I'm Richard Lanning, compliance officer from the Hickory County Community Oversight Task Force." I stared at him. "That a real thing?" "It is, sir," he said stiffly. "We investigate complaints related to zoning disputes and community safety. The call indicated your property has been obstructing previously accessible land and that confrontations with residents may be escalating." My jaw tightened. I stepped fully outside and closed the door behind me. "Let me guess. Karen." The deputy glanced down at his tablet. "Complainant's name is redacted, sir, but we are obligated to investigate all reported incidents." I chuckled dryly. "Anyone report the fence getting smashed in last week? The bottle thrown over the gate? The footprints around my pool?" No answer. I gestured toward the eastern pasture. "That lake. It's mine. So is the fence. You want documentation?" "I'll need to see it," Richard said, as if it were some kind of punishment for him. I went back inside, grabbed the folder, deed, survey, legal description, notarized and stamped, and handed it over. The compliance guy examined the documents like they personally offended him. "It appears," he said slowly, "that your property indeed predates the Hickory Ridge subdivision." "No kidding." "However," he added, grasping for something, "we may still need to assess whether there has been a historic prescriptive easement created through long-term community use." That got a real laugh out of me. "You think some suburbanites splashing in my lake for a couple summers counts as historic use?" The deputy shot me a sympathetic look. "Mr. Barrett, we just needed to confirm things were peaceful. No further action will be taken at this time." The compliance guy wasn't happy, but he knew he didn't have a leg to stand on. They left about 15 minutes later. I watched from my porch as they pulled away. No apology, just process. 10 minutes after they were gone, I got a notification on my phone. "Motion alert, South Gate." Live feed showed Karen standing at the gate, arms crossed, wearing a jogging suit and a smug smile, like she'd just won something. She didn't say a word, just stared at the camera, then walked away. That's when I knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot. Later that week, I got a call from my attorney, Mike. George said they filed a complaint with the municipal board. What kind of complaint? Alleging obstruction of community access, environmental misuse of a water resource, and non-compliance with local code, even though you're not subject to it. It's noise, but we need to respond. I ask the obvious question. Do they seriously think they can win this? "They don't need to win," George replied. "They just need to keep you tied up, waste your time, make you look like the bad guy. And if they get enough public support, the city might cave and pressure you to negotiate." That's when the social media posts started. One of the residents from the HOA, some guy named Bradley with too much time and too few brain cells, started a Facebook group, Take Back the Lake. The profile photo was a drone shot of my lake. He'd drawn a heart around it with the caption, "Ours, not his." They called me Lake Mike. Made me sound like some cartoon villain. There were memes. Claims that I threatened children with a weapon, that I dumped chemicals in the lake, that I hoarded water during drought conditions. It would have been laughable if it didn't spread so fast. Local moms were sharing it. Posts started popping up on Nextdoor. Someone even put flyers in mailboxes saying I was endangering community access and blocking safe swim areas for local kids. The irony? I wasn't the one endangering anyone. They were the ones breaking onto private land, ignoring signs, climbing fences. There was no safe swim area. There was just my property, my lake, and my damn right to say no. I beefed up security again. New locks, louder alarms, added gravel to the back trail to make it louder when people tried sneaking through. One night, I caught 2 teenagers trying to climb the fence. One of them fell and twisted his ankle. I called the sheriff again. They were picked up, no charges pressed. But the parents? Oh, they were furious at me. "He's the one who put the fence there," the mom screamed, right in front of the deputy. "It used to be safe before this psychopath came along." The deputy, God bless him, just said, "Ma'am, your son was trespassing. He's lucky that's all that happened." They left. I went back inside, drained, tired, angry. I wasn't trying to be the villain, but damn it, I wasn't about to be the victim either. I was done playing defense. Up until that point, I'd tried to handle things with quiet resistance. Build the fence, show the papers, keep my head down. But that only made them bolder. Karen was escalating, and every time I thought I'd seen the worst of it, she'd find a new way to twist the knife. So I decided to twist back. George, my lawyer, had a guy, Alex, a forensic auditor and former IRS contractor who owed him a favor. Alex specialized in nonprofit oversight, and lucky for me, homeowners associations technically fell under the same scrutiny as any other incorporated community organization. I told him everything I knew about Hickory Ridge Estates, their board, their meetings, their bylaws, or lack thereof. Alex got to work. Meanwhile, I started filing records requests with the county. Public documents, board filings, tax status reports, compliance certifications. Most of them were boring as hell, but then I found something interesting. The HOA's corporate charter hadn't been properly renewed in over 3 years. Their last financial audit on record was 5 years old. And as far as I could tell, no one had ever submitted updated board minutes to the county, which was a big no-no for a registered HOA. That's when the first chess piece moved. I sent a formal complaint to the county's Code Enforcement and Regulatory Compliance Office, citing suspected administrative irregularities and requesting a formal review. I didn't accuse anyone directly, just pointed out inconsistencies in filings, lack of public notices, and missing audit data. Within a week, I received confirmation that a review had been opened. Then I filed a second complaint, this time to the Georgia Department of Revenue. Based on Alex's initial findings, Hickory Ridge had been collecting dues under a nonprofit designation while also funneling money into what looked like private legal retainers. That's tax fraud territory. Even if it wasn't criminal, it was enough to justify a full review. I wasn't trying to burn the whole place down, but I wasn't going to let them keep throwing rocks while hiding behind procedural smoke screens. I was going to drag them out into the sun and make them squint. And Karen, she didn't know it yet, but her empire had termites. The next HOA meeting was a circus. Howard, my retired neighbor, snuck in again and sent me photos. The projector screen read, "Unauthorized harassment from adjacent property owner." There were new bullet points, weaponization of bureaucracy, malicious filings, and, my personal favorite, attempted sabotage of community unity. Karen was apparently livid. She called me a paper terrorist and accused me of trying to bankrupt the HOA by weaponizing obscure tax laws. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the IRS had already sent a letter requesting financial disclosure, and that a county compliance officer had scheduled an in-person visit the following week. I didn't say a word publicly. I let it simmer. Around this time, things started shifting in the neighborhood. A few residents, cautiously, quietly, started contacting me. Not all of them were true believers in Karen's crusade. One guy, Tom, was on the HOA Finance Committee. He'd grown uncomfortable with how dues were being spent, especially the legal bills. He said Karen had been using HOA funds to pay for a private attorney without a vote. Another woman, Denise, said she'd been threatened with a fine for speaking out at the last board meeting. They weren't allies yet, but they were cracks in the wall. Then, one afternoon, I got a knock at the gate. It was Tom. He didn't come inside, just stood on the gravel path, looking like a man deciding whether to jump off a very high cliff. "She's hiding something," he said quietly. "Karen, she's been moving money around, pushing contracts through without proper documentation. And there's a second bank account. I saw it once." She closed the laptop as soon as I walked in. I let that hang in the air. "You have anything in writing?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Give me a few days." After he left, I installed another security camera, this one facing the gravel path, just in case Karen decided to find out what Tom had been up to. George was practically giddy when I told him what Tom said. "Mike, this is bigger than just a fence now. If there's a second account, and if she used HOA funds for personal legal battles, that's embezzlement, misuse of fiduciary responsibility, maybe even felony fraud, depending on amounts." "She's cornered," I said. "That's when people get reckless." "She already is," he replied. "We just haven't seen the worst of it yet." I believed him, because that same night, I received a certified letter from the HOA's legal rep, demanding, again, that I immediately dismantle all fencing obstructing community recreational access or face a civil suit for damages. This time, I didn't laugh. This time, I drafted my own letter, backed by 3 statutory citations, 2 complaints in process, and a copy of the HOA's expired nonprofit certificate, and mailed it straight back. I had been polite, I had been quiet, but now, I was lawyering up, digging deep, and burning daylight, and Karen was going to learn something about fences. They don't just keep people out. Sometimes they keep wolves in. Tom kept his word. 3 days later, he showed up again. Same gravel path, same twitchy eyes like he was being followed, but this time he had a flash drive. "I pulled some backups," he said quietly. "Meeting notes, financial statements, and emails. Lots of emails. You make copies?" "No, I don't want them. I don't even want to know what's on there." He didn't stay long, just handed me the drive like it was radioactive and walked off without another word. I watched his back disappear into the pines, then went inside and plugged it into an old laptop I kept offline for exactly this kind of paranoid scenario. The folder structure was neat. HOA Finance, 2022. Legal fees. Then, private board only. Then, Karen notes. And then, emails. I read the first one, then the second. Then I stopped counting. There were dozens. Internal board discussions where Karen flat out instructed the treasurer to redirect funds into a discretionary legal fund, not approved by vote. A few threads where she coached board members on how to justify community benefit when hiring her personal attorney. One email literally read, "We just need to frame it as a preemptive defense of neighborhood access rights." Don't mention Mike's name in official language, but it got worse. In one thread, Karen asked a local mapping contractor if there's a way to present the shoreline boundary as ambiguous, and whether older satellite images could be used to show past public use. The contractor refused and told her it could be legally problematic. She replied, "Nobody's going to dig that deep. We just need it to look good in front of the committee." That was all I needed. I sent it all to George. 20 minutes later, he called, actually laughing. "Mike, this is a career-ending level of stupid. Think it's usable?" "Oh, we're past usable. This is exhibit material." He filed an emergency motion to introduce new evidence in the HOA's pending civil complaint. The hearing wasn't for another 2 weeks, but George made sure the opposing counsel got a courtesy copy. According to him, that's called lighting a fuse. I didn't hear anything from Karen for 2 days. Then I got an email. Not from her. From Bradley, the HOA's golden retriever in human form who ran the Take Back the Lake page. Apparently, the page was being rebranded to Community First and would be stepping back from commentary regarding private land disputes. The group vanished from Facebook less than an hour later. That's when I knew Karen was losing grip. But she wasn't done. She started showing up at the property line again, not saying anything, just standing there, watching. A few times I caught her trying to talk to my neighbors when they were working near the fence. One of them, Denise, told me Karen offered to cover half their dues if they could convince me to ease the restrictions. Subtle bribery, classic HOA charm. Then came the tampering. My Western security camera, the one closest to the trail, suddenly stopped transmitting. When I checked it the next morning, the lens had been scratched with something sharp. Not broken, not stolen, just blinded. That was a message. I replaced it with a newer, better model, infrared, higher resolution tamper alerts built in. The next time someone approached it, I'd get an instant ping on my phone. Karen wasn't just panicking, she was unraveling. The cherry on top came 2 days later when George forwarded me a formal response from the HOA's attorney, a half-hearted motion to delay the hearing pending internal review and board transition. I read between the lines. People were jumping ship. I reached out to Tom to confirm. "They're holding emergency meetings every other night," he said. Karen's trying to spin it like you hacked her files. But she knows it's over. She's cornered, Mike. Is she still president? Technically, yes. But not for long. He paused, then added, "There's something else. I found an account. A second checking account, separate from the main HOA fund. It's in the name of a shell LLC. She's been moving money there for months." I went cold. How much? At least 60 grand. Can you prove it? I have statements. Tom sent them the same day. George's response was immediate. This changes everything. We're going criminal now. By that evening, he had filed a formal report with the State Attorney General's office and submitted the financials to the local district attorney. What started as a battle over a fence was now a full-blown fraud investigation. And the irony? I hadn't lifted a finger in aggression. I didn't need to. All I did was shine a light. The termites did the rest. I always thought collapse would be loud, sirens shouting, lights. But this was quiet, systemic, like a dam cracking piece by piece while the water's still calm on the surface. The first sign came in the form of a letter slipped anonymously into my mailbox. No envelope, just a folded printout of a screenshot, a group chat among several HOA board members. The message read, "We need a full audit. If she drained $60,000, we're all legally exposed. Beneath that, if we don't vote to suspend her, we're complicit. She's not taking me down with her." It was unsigned, but I recognized the names. Denise, a guy named Russell. Even Bradley, the Facebook crusader, had apparently grown a conscience. Or maybe just a lawyer. Then came the news from George. The IRS audit had officially started. Not a scare letter, not a preliminary inquiry. A full-on, suited-up, document-demanding, meeting-scheduling federal audit. Karen must have heard before we did, because that same day, the HOA's website went dark. Just vanished. No redirect, no maintenance message. Gone. The next HOA board meeting was closed door, held in one of the model homes that Karen used as her command center. But neighbors weren't stupid. Howard, my inside man, called me an hour after it ended. She tried to resign, he said. Framed it as temporary medical leave, but they wouldn't accept it. Denise stood up and read your lawyer's motion out loud. You could hear a pin drop. She's still president. By the time they got to a vote, 2 more board members walked out. They didn't even have quorum to finish. It's chaos over there. Good. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. Publicly. But legally? George was working overtime. He filed a formal injunction request to freeze the HOA's financial activity until the investigation concluded. He submitted a list of demands for financial transparency going back 7 years. He even had a local forensic accountant issue a preliminary valuation of unauthorized expenditures, which now topped $84,000. HOA residents started talking. Some knocked on my gate. One woman brought homemade pie, blueberry, as a peace offering. She apologized for sharing that post about you being aggressive. Another guy offered to help me repaint the western side of the fence, where the boards had been cracked and warped by last year's vandalism. I didn't say much, just thanked them and let them talk. They weren't the enemy. They'd been manipulated, used, just like that budget fund, and those phony petitions, and the satellite images Karen had doctored. Oh yeah, that too. Tom found a draft email where Karen instructed the contractor to enhance shoreline imagery to imply public usage, and even suggested using Photoshop if needed. He never sent it, but he saved it, and now it was part of the case file. That, more than anything, broke her in the public eye. It leaked. Local media picked it up. HOA accused of faking evidence in property dispute. They ran it on the evening news with a split screen, my quiet, tree-lined lake on one side, and Karen's smug headshot from the HOA newsletter on the other. The comment section, brutal. Karen disappeared from public view after that. The Lexus didn't drive by anymore. The Facebook page was still gone. The HOA stopped sending letters, emails, threats. It was like the oxygen had been sucked out of their little paper kingdom. But George wasn't done. We're pushing for a full financial audit now. Not just IRS, but state level. If that second bank account's tied to HOA dues, she's cooked. She'll panic, I said. She already is. And she did. That same week, we received notice from a local mediator. Karen had proposed alternative resolution before the court hearing. Her lawyer offered to settle the matter privately and asked if I'd be willing to open negotiations. George laughed out loud when he read it. She's trying to avoid discovery. If we settle, the investigation dies. We're not settling. Damn right we're not. The next day, I got a package on my porch. No postage, no return address. Inside, the HOA's old printed newsletter from 3 years ago. On the front page, a photo of Karen shaking hands with a county commissioner, smiling beneath the headline, Our vision for shared growth. On the bottom, someone had written in Sharpie, "She saw your lake as a future amenity." It was always about development. That was the last nail. This wasn't about kids swimming. It was never about aesthetics. It was about leverage, value. She wanted my land, or at least control over it, to boost her neighborhood's prestige and resale value. She saw a resource and thought she could take it, legally, socially, politically. But she underestimated one thing. I fought smarter than she did. I didn't scream, I didn't threaten, I didn't break laws or throw punches. I just held the line. And now, with her lies exposed, her finances frozen, and her power crumbling, the line held. It always ends with a bank. You can scream about property rights, throw lawsuits, fake maps, twist bylaws into pretzels, but money leaves a trail. And if you follow it long enough, eventually someone trips. It happened on a Tuesday morning. George called me before I'd even had my coffee. He didn't waste time. She's gone. Gone where? Her phone's off, car's missing. Her lawyer says he hasn't spoken to her in over 48 hours. I stepped out onto the porch, stared across the pasture toward the trailhead, near the HOA boundary. All was quiet. No Lexus, no one jogging in pastels. Just silence. George continued. The forensic accountant flagged 3 separate wire transfers made last week from the HOA operating fund, funneled through the Shell LLC Tom found. Total amount, $119,000. Where'd it go? A checking account in Florida, opened under a different name, but the Social Security number traces back to a dead relative of hers. Real amateur hour fraud. I didn't say anything. She's running, Mike. How long until they catch her? She's not exactly subtle. It's a matter of hours. He was right. By noon, I got a call from a local reporter. Somehow, news had leaked that Karen K. Monroe, president of Hickory Ridge HOA, was under active investigation for financial misconduct and suspected embezzlement. A warrant had been issued that morning. She was now officially a fugitive. At 4:40 that afternoon, she was pulled over by Florida state troopers about 30 miles outside Jacksonville, driving a rental car under a false name with a suitcase full of burner phones, prepaid debit cards, and $67,000 in cash, all stuffed into a tacky leather duffel bag. No family photos, no clothes, just cash and a handful of HOA documents, including, and I'm not making this up, a laminated copy of the original neighborhood development plan with a red X drawn over my lake. That told me everything I needed to know. Even as she fled, even as the world collapsed around her, she still thought she could own what was mine. They cuffed her on the spot. The arrest footage hit local news that night. Karen, still in her pastel cardigan, hair a mess, mascara running, being walked across a parking lot in zip ties. The local ABC anchor called it a shocking fall from grace and described her as the once influential president of a prominent Lakeside Homeowners Association. The comments section roasted her alive. I didn't post, didn't say a word. I just watched. 2 days later, George and I sat in the county courthouse. Karen was denied bail due to flight risk. Her lawyer tried to argue it was a mental health spiral and not intentional theft. The judge wasn't buying it. Then came the statement from Tom. He stood before the court and calmly detailed the secret account, the forged financial reports, the backdated board votes, said he regretted not speaking up sooner. When the prosecutor asked why he finally came forward, he said, "Because Mike never lied, not once, and she never told the truth." I watched from the back. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The judge ordered a full forensic audit of the HOA's finances and granted a temporary injunction to dissolve the board pending further investigation. George leaned over and whispered, "We just cut off the head." But Karen wasn't the only one with scars. Several board members resigned within 48 hours. Others were subpoenaed. HOA operations were frozen. Dues stopped being collected. The neighborhood message board turned into a war zone. Neighbors arguing over who knew what, who supported who had Karen's back until the bitter end. Some wanted revenge. Others just wanted peace. I didn't want either. I just wanted quiet. That week, I walked my fence line, all 40 acres, every post, every gate, every worn patch of trail. I checked the locks, the cameras, the motion lights. I paused by the lake, watched the sun cut across the water. No kids, no music, just frogs and dragonflies. For the first time in months, I exhaled without bracing for impact. The last thing I did that day was hang a new sign on the main gate. Private property. Trespassers will be documented. And underneath, in smaller letters, respect is not a shared resource. The headlines died down within a week. One minute, Karen Monroe was the queen of Hickory Ridge, and the next, she was just another tab in the local news feed, buried somewhere between a stolen lawnmower story and a bake sale fundraiser. Her name became shorthand for suburban overreach. I even heard a local radio host use the phrase, "Don't go full Karen," in reference to a HOA zoning dispute in another county. Justice moved slow, but it moved. She pled out. No big trial, no cameras in the courtroom, no dramatic speeches. She accepted a deal, pleaded guilty to wire fraud, misappropriation of HOA funds, and filing false financial statements. Got 18 months federal time plus restitution. She'll never hold a board position again. Probably never live within 500 feet of an HOA without giving someone PTSD. The state appointed an interim HOA administrator. He looked like a guy who owned more cardigans than facial expressions. He sent me a letter, not to threaten, but to apologize. Actually used that word. Said the board had operated outside its authority and assured me that no further actions would be taken regarding shared access to your property. I framed it and hung it in my shop, right next to a small piece of the original fence post they rammed last summer. Souvenirs from a war most people wouldn't even know had been fought. The neighborhood changed after that. Some residents moved out. Others stayed, a little quieter, a little more aware of how fragile power really is when it's not backed by truth. I got invited to a few block parties. I declined, not out of spite, just peace. I'd earned some. The lake stayed mine. No swimmers, no trail cutters, no accidental joggers veering off course. I added more wild growth near the south bank. Let the reeds come in thick and natural, so it looked less like a beach and more like what it really was. Private shoreline, untouched and uninviting. Sometimes I'd sit on the dock with coffee and just listen. The water, the wind, no shouting, no whining, just space. That fence still stood, but it wasn't about the wood. It never had been. The real boundary was the one I drew the first day I said no, and kept saying it, louder, clearer, until no one could pretend they didn't hear it. People say freedom means doing whatever you want. I think it means knowing when to stop others from doing whatever they want to you. One afternoon, Howard came by. He was moving, heading out west to be near his grandkids. Before he left, he brought me an old bottle of whiskey and a smile. "You shook the system," he said. "Most folks just bend to it." "I just stood my ground," I replied. He nodded. "Sometimes that's enough to knock the whole damn thing over." We sat for a bit, talked about fishing, rifles, and why riding mowers are better than zero turns for hilly land. Then he left. I haven't seen him since. And me? I'm still here, still walking the fence line, still checking the locks, not out of fear, out of habit and pride. Because every post, every inch, every line drawn in that soil says one thing, loud and clear. You don't get to rewrite the map just because you bought a house near mine. This land is mine, and it still knows my name.